Hello, everybody. Here with me is Dr. John Gray. And John, I'm so excited to have you here. And Dr. John Gray is the author of the most well-known and trusted relationship book of all time. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And USA Today listed his book as one of the top 10 most influential books of the last quarter century. In hardcover, it was the number one best-selling book of the 1990s. And Dr. Gray's books are translated into approximately 45 languages in more than 100 countries and continues to be a bestseller. And Dr. Gray has written over 20 books. And it's what an achievement, John.
Thank you so much, Olga. It's a pleasure to be with you, as always.
Thank you. And I met John approximately 15 years ago at the medical conference A4M. And today we are going to have a fascinating discussion on the topic how emotional intelligence influences relationships. And I prepare some questions for you, John. And my first question is, what is emotional intelligence?
I love that whole subject. There's a book that was well known for emotional intelligence 1.0, 2.0. I might write a book called Emotional Intelligence 3.0 because what emotional intelligence has two aspects of it. How do we look within ourselves and realize many times we're overreacting? Many times our past is affecting how we're reacting to a situation. And how can we clearly see it from a logical perspective as well as an emotional perspective? So the other aspect is what I offer to the table is specifically emotional intelligence for men versus for women. I see everything through the glasses of gender. And not that the other messages aren't valuable and useful. They point out tendencies in human beings that we need to be able to see ourselves as not responding in the best way in a situation. For example, one of the things women will often do, sometimes men will do if they're more feminine, as a situation happens and they'll say, "Oh, you're always busy. You're never at home." Now, as soon as she says you're always busy, you're never at home, because I have emotional intelligence, I'm not going to take her literally. Otherwise, we're in an argument, because I could easily logically say, I'm not always gone and you're not always alone. I was here, and here, and here. And then we could be in an argument, as opposed to realizing sometimes when people express their feelings, they amplify them just to be heard more. And particularly for women, I've seen this happen and help men to understand don't take emotions literally all the time, but realize that she's just expressing a feeling that when someone has some empathy and can hear that, the feeling will shift to a more positive feeling. So having that awareness, emotional intelligence, is the ability to hear someone in a more loving, positive way. Now, the flip side of that is for myself with my intelligence is if I'm upset, then I have to process that in order to come back to feeling calm, loving, and supportive. And for men particularly, this is 3.0, and this is the next level up, is what I need to practice is not talking about it right away, but taking some time to do something to make me feel good and then reflect on what I was feeling and challenge it. Is this an appropriate way to react to someone? But always, whether a man or a woman, we want to create the awareness of what am I feeling, and then why am I feeling that? And why am I feeling that? For example, if you're frustrated with your partner in a relationship, you might just think, oh, they didn't do this and I wanted that. And that's a bit of an angry feeling, a frustration feeling, an irritation feeling. Well, emotional intelligence allows us to go a little deeper, which means if I'm frustrated, I'm also disappointed. So that when you say, oh, I'm frustrated about this, I'm disappointed about you didn't do this, and I was hoping this would happen, the whole energy softens from frustration, which is resistance, to a sense of disappointment, a little bit of sadness. And if that doesn't release the negative charge, then I'll look a little deeper and I'll say, oh, I'm disappointed. Well, why is that? Life has disappointments all the time. I expected this to happen. It didn't happen. I adjust my expectations. But sometimes it's hard to adjust the expectation. And so you look, why is it hard for me to adjust the expectation? Because, the reality is life is never perfect. Our partners are never perfect. There's always going to be frustrations. There's always going to be disappointments. If you're in touch with your feelings, they'll be there from time to time. But if you can't let go of them quickly, and that's somebody who has mastered their emotional intelligence, is when they can be upset and they can explore it and let it go. And when you let it go, you come back to a place of acceptance, appreciation, trust, the love that you felt prior to the incident. But if I'm stuck in my feeling of, well, I'm just so disappointed, I'm so sad, then I will ask the question of myself or help someone learn emotional intelligence. Well, what am I afraid of? What's my concern? Because if I'm disappointed and I can't let it go, maybe I'm disappointed my partner was unhappy with me. Well, I can let that go. She doesn't have to be happy with me all the time. Nobody's perfect. Then what I do is say, well, why am I stuck in that? Go a little deeper. What am I afraid of? And well, I'm afraid that she'll continue to be disappointed with me and that she won't like me as much and she won't love me as much and that she'll punish me. And then the mind has a chance to look at these irrational thoughts and then come back to letting it go to something like a shift can take place where you then ask yourself, well, what is it that I want? I want my partner to love me. I want her to like me. I want her to appreciate me. I want her to trust me. And now my whole energy has shifted from what I don't want, which is resistance, to what I do want. And as I shift to what I do want, my mind now focuses on, well, I can do nice things for her. I know she loves me. Your wisdom has a chance to come up and neutralize the negative emotions. And that's part of emotional intelligence.
Thank you, John. And I would like to add that only approximately 36% of people, they do have emotional intelligence. And also, this trait, emotional intelligence, it's passed genetically, and
Yes.
also it is influenced by environment.
Completely. What people don't realize, there's two studies, and I think you're probably aware of them, but I'll share them. And that is so many of our emotional reactions are just programmed. And they're programmed from the first 7 years of our life. In the first 7 years of our life, the environment that we're in, the condition of our parents, how they treat each other, how my siblings treat each other, how I'm treated by others, all the environmental factors will affect me much, much more in the first 7 years of life. And what we now know is with brain frequencies, you can measure brain frequencies. A child, boy or girl, for the first 7 years of their life, most of the time, their brain is in the frequency of theta brain state. And in that state, it's the same as dream state or deep hypnosis, which is what you're very familiar with, is helping people rewire themselves by going into a trance state, a hypnotic state, a relaxed state. And this all can be rewired with good techniques, which of course you do. So that's one aspect of the programming. But another way that people don't realize is our parents are behaving one way, but quite often there's things underneath that. In order to preserve the peace or the inability to preserve the peace, they have a lot of negative emotions, overreactivity, insecurity, doubts, guilt, shame, overpleasing, narcissism, all these problems that our parents have. We absorb them all in the first 7 years of life. I can't say all of them, but to a great extent, we observe it and we wonder later on, why am I reacting so strongly here? And I call that when you're triggered, when clearly you're having a reaction and your mind is going, why can't I let go of this? Why am I having such a strong reaction? That's generally your first 7 years of life, which is where we absorb our parents' problems as well as our own. And I think what you were alluding to is that there's some research that it indicates it may even be 7 generations we absorb in our genes. And the study there is with the little birds, where the bird is traumatized, and then the bird has babies, and the babies have the same traumatic reaction to, say, the man with the brown hat. And then the next generation of babies has the same reaction. Even if the man with the brown hat has never traumatized them or whatever, there's going to be that reaction coming up, coming up, coming up. A simple way of looking at that is some people just have a huge phobia with snakes, for example. That comes from generations before, because I don't have a phobia like that. My daughter doesn't have that. And I know that's the work where you can create tremendous change right away, particularly, which is ironical. Some of our most irrational fears, which we call big fears, are most quickly healed because they're so far away from the truth. A little bit of processing can make them go away very quickly.
Thank you, John. And I would like to add, it's so amazing that you mentioned about programming. Like emotional intelligence is programmed during our childhood. And also there is now an evidence that trauma passes genetically as transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. And it's actually one of my questions was what are the root cause of low emotional intelligence? And it calls EQ, and you already answered this question. And it is trauma that pass genetically and even experience in the womb, and or also during the childhood.
And the birth trauma as well.
Yeah. And it can be the birth trauma. And also I would like to mention that I read some very interesting article, and it was written there that emotions are created and creating certain biochemicals in our body. And these biochemicals create feelings.
Yes.
Because emotions are not our feelings. And interestingly enough, some people can feel the emotions very strongly, and some cannot feel almost at all. And it's how somatically people experience emotions. That's why I believe some people have high emotional intelligence when they can actually feel somatically the emotions. They can feel and they can recognize them and they can manage them. And some people cannot feel at all. And if they cannot feel at all, how you can recognize your emotions and how you can manage, right?
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
And
What people don't understand emotional intelligence. I mean, you have to learn a lot of this. And even the word people use a lot is my feelings. I feel this or I feel this. But actually, they're feeling their thoughts. They're feeling their beliefs. A common phrase a woman might say about her husband in my practice is, I feel like he doesn't love me. Whenever you say, I feel like, what you're feeling is a belief. You could also just say, I think my husband doesn't love me. It's just, you can use your analytical side of the brain to say, I think this is true. Or you can say, if you're more on your feminine side, you say, I feel like this is true. But in both cases, you're just acknowledging how I am experiencing my belief. And that's my belief. It's not fact. But what is fact is that that's how I feel. So often people confuse, if I have a feeling, it must be true, because you can't argue. If you tell me you feel hot, I can't tell you you don't feel hot. But you could say, I feel my husband doesn't love me when he does this. And I can clearly say, he still loves you. That doesn't mean he doesn't love you. But people often think because I feel it, it must be true. And that's not the case. And also, this ability to feel is just one of the ways of knowing. We have sensation is the way I can know my hand is cool, my hand is hot. It's just a way of knowing. I can think an idea. That's a way of knowing what I'm thinking. What I believe is I think this is true, or I don't think this is true. Or you can use, I can feel this is true. But feelings are most healthy when you use feelings to experience your emotions. The only way you can experience emotion is by feeling it. And that's what you're getting at there, is that when you can't feel your emotions, you can't let them go. So if you have anxiety, for example, as a young man, I had huge anxiety. Now I have none. And that's the promise of emotional intelligence. I used to, literally want to throw up. My knees would shake. I'd be before a presentation. I was a teacher at the age of 19 where I was teaching meditation, had so much anxiety. And I thought, well, if I have so much anxiety, this must be the wrong career. Maybe I should not do this. It's like punishing myself. But I was so lucky. I read an interview with John Lennon of the Beatles. And John Lennon, they asked him in the interview, why did the Beatles stop touring? They were the biggest band in the world at the time. Oh, the women were screaming. They could do no wrong. All their songs were number one. But they only toured for 3 years. And they said, why did you stop touring? He said, because we had so much anxiety before every performance. We would throw up for days. We'd be sick thinking about it. And that's also why they would take so much drugs or act out and destroy hotel rooms, that kind of thing that the rock stars do. They just have so much anxiety. And so I thought, well, if John Lennon has anxiety, clearly he's doing the right job for him. He just hasn't learned how to handle his anxiety. And it was through emotional intelligence and doing the kind of processing that you do, that I do, healed that completely. And I have no anxiety. I never have any anxiety. I can stand in front of 10,000 people, big, huge talks, or I have a little group. I have no anxiety when I'm on stage, and in my life, I don't have anxiety. But it was emotional intelligence that helped me identify, where did that fear come from? Why do I have so much fear coming up? Well, first of all, many people do have a fear around public speaking. And that's because, first of all, when you're facing other people, there's more attention on you. So if there's more attention on you, there's more energy, you're being seen. You can look in the mirror and you have no issues on your body to a certain extent. But if you were to be naked in public, that's a lot of attention on you, focusing on you, and you become aware of yourself even more. So self-awareness brings us to a place where we get in touch with, what is it that causes fear in us? Well, I was able, through emotional intelligence, through therapy, to look at where that came from. And where it came from was when I was 6 years old. It's a long story, but basically I was separated from my family in a strange state. We lived in Texas. We were in California on a vacation. And I got separated from my mother at 6 years old for 7 days, which was huge trauma, which I didn't remember at all. It was like forgotten. As soon as it got me back to my family, I was happy again. Kids just sort of push things down. But every time I was in front of an audience, it was those fears of being abandoned, which is feeling rejected, feeling unworthy, all those feelings that come from an experience for a child of losing love. And when I was able to look at that and explore those feelings and do a therapeutic process, all my anxiety went away. It didn't go away the first time. It helped the first time, the next time, the next time. Every time I'd feel anxiety, I'd feel that feeling, go back in time, use our processing technique to let it go, and then come back into present time. And eventually it was just gone. It got handled. So much of what we experience in life, if we just have the awareness going to that. Awareness is the light going into the darkness. And if you bring the light in, you don't push the darkness out. It's just gone. If my room is dark, I don't have to do anything. I just turn on the light. So as therapists, what we do is we turn on the light on these different emotions. And just feeling it, feeling the emotion, and then here's the key, and then giving it a word to identify it. As soon as you give an emotion a word, now you're using your adult self, your present time. A child cannot give words to it. They don't know what they're feeling. They're just crying. They're upset. They don't know why they're upset, or they know a little bit why they're upset, but they'll just be stuck in that emotion. And then it would just pass. It will go push down into the unconscious. So we have the opportunity when we have phobias, when we have anxieties, or we find ourselves being triggered, getting angry, and then later going, why did I get so angry? What was the problem? Why did I react that way? So many women today, they experience their mind busy, 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 and they can't relax it. Why can't I just relax and enjoy this moment? Their mind is thinking all these other things. That's because there's some emotion inside that she's not aware of. But if she was to become aware of that and then could become aware of where that's coming from and share it with someone, then suddenly the brain can go, okay, I looked at the emotion, now I can let it go. But we have to be able to identify it with the prefrontal cortex. And these are all in the back limbic system of the brain, the childlike part of the brain. And that's what we do in therapy, is do it in a structured way. And that's emotional intelligence. And I keep mentioning therapy because I help people learn this, but I do this for myself. Okay. And now at 72 years old, I rarely get triggered about anything because I've done this work on myself. And my life is very smooth sailing. But most people don't have this knowledge. It's so important to upgrade our knowledge of how to process our negativity inside and not just suppress it or not just eat. So many people are overweight because if you're feeling upset, just eat, and it uses up the energy of the emotion. Or they take drugs, which uses up the energy. Or they have big arguments and fights, and then they feel better afterwards. This is not the way to heal the inner self. It will give you relief, but it's only temporary, and the problem keeps coming back.
Thank you, John. And I would like to add to this that emotional intelligence is not only perceive and to become aware and to manage your own emotions,
Yes.
but also other people's too.
Yes.
What I observe, some very, very interesting thing, that some people, they do learn some powerful techniques, some body language, how to observe people's expressions of face, body language, and kind of predict their emotions and what does it mean. For me, it's not true emotional intelligence. I call it artificial emotional intelligence because some parts of brain are, are registering emotions, and emotions are processed in autonomic nervous system. And if your nervous system does not allow you truly somatically to feel emotions, or, for example, observe and understand other people's emotions, it will be very hard to understand your own emotions and also understand other people's emotions and to predict how to behave in certain situations.
I completely agree with you. When I think back on that point you're making, when I was a little boy, I'm naturally very empathetic. So I kind of born with one aspect of emotional intelligence, which is if you're in touch with what your feelings are, it's easy to anticipate what somebody else's reaction might be. And I remember being aware that if I said this, that person would get upset. Or if I said this, that might make them upset. Or if I asked for this, they might feel bad, but that they can't give it to me. So I remember wondering as a child, and then I had this career, how can I communicate what I want in a way that will work? And I had no answers at that point. Now, part of emotional intelligence is learning how to communicate a request. Often for women, that's a very challenging thing, which is how to ask your partner to do things, because they could say no. They could become irritated. They could become, feel like you're nagging or you're demanding or whatever. And so should I ask? Can I ask? How to ask? This is like a new skill for people. And that's also part of emotional intelligence, 3.0, which is the Mars Venus approach, because there's so many times women, in my experience, they don't ask for help. They feel in their mind, if he's willing to do it, he would already do it. Can he see that I need this help or want to be helped? And another one, if he loves me, he'll do it. So that's called this romantic testing that a lot of women have. It's like, he just doesn't love me as much because he doesn't offer to do things. Because there is a kind of a immature version of romance of a little girl, which is daddy will do everything for me and I don't have to ask. And we have to grow up and realize that just because your partner doesn't offer to do things, even though that's really nice if they do it, if they don't offer to do it, it must mean he doesn't want to do it, he's not willing to do it, or he doesn't care enough about me to do it. And that could be completely wrong. All you have to do is learn to ask. And then a woman might say, well, if I have to ask, it doesn't count. And I go, actually, it does count if you start doing it, because you start to feel at ease and comfortable, this new skill of asking for what you want for your emotional needs to be fulfilled. Because emotional intelligence today is so important, particularly because the dynamics of the man-female relationship, of the partnership relationship, even if it's a gay relationship or not, whatever, there's a partnership that goes on. And one tends to hold the polarity of the male side. The other one holds the polarity of the female side. And this is by temperament as well. Many of the things I'm saying could, a woman about a man, a woman might feel, well, that's me, and reversed. But biologically, there is a difference here. And so the tendency is one partner is going to have more of a romantic sense of what love looks like. And they're not going to be willing to ask for help, when really, if you ask, you will get. And if you ask the wrong way, you might not get. But if you assume, and this is no emotional intelligence, if you assume your partner's not willing to help you, and therefore you're not going to ask, you might be making a big mistake. So I have a funny example of this. One time, my dear wife, Bonnie, now Bonnie and I were married for 34 years. She passed on 5 years ago, but I talk about her a lot, and that makes me very happy as well. And she wanted to get a dog, and we were discussing it. And then one day she just saw this dog, and without asking me at all, brought the dog home. And I was fine with that, and then so we have this dog, and to get a dog in California, you have to get 3 shots, 3 different visits to the doctor. And so the first 2 times she brought the dog, because she was feeling more responsible. After all, she picked the dog and did the whole thing. But each time when she'd come home, she complained for about 5 or 10 minutes. That was so terrible. There was so much traffic. Why is the vet so far away? This dog is so protective of me. Just, he was barking, barking, barking. It was like crazy. So she basically described it as a terrible experience. And she did the first 2 times. For the 3rd time, she said, so John, we have to take the dog to the vet. So will you take the dog to the vet? So to get the wording here. So do you want to take the dog to the vet? I said, no, I don't want to take the dog to the vet. And she was like, what? I did it twice. You're not willing to do it once? I said, honey, I will do it. But you asked me the question, do you want to do it? See, men can be very literal. Do you want me to do it? No, I don't want to do it. And she says, how could you not want to do it? And my answer was, well, you've just described why you don't want to do it. I can understand why I want to do it. And then I explained to her, I said, but I'm happy to do it if it will make you happy. You asked me whether I want to do it? No. But if it's going to make you happy, then I'm happy to do it. And now I want to do it. And that was hard for her to even grok that, just to understand that a person can shift just like that. I was sharing with somebody back in the day when the Chinese, their stock market was going up. They would pay me $100,000 to come give a talk for a day. Now, that's a long trip all the way to China, coming back and everything. I'd rather just stay at home and teach in America. And so I don't want to get on a long flight to China and give a talk. But when somebody says you're going to get paid $100,000, I was like, I want to go to China. So that's the way men think, particularly if the goal is something that's important to me, then even if I don't want to do it, I now want to do it. So many times a woman won't ask a man to do something because she can sense she already has enough empathy or sort of intuition to go, well, he's going to grumble about it. He doesn't want to do that. And maybe he doesn't want to. But when you ask a man, he said, honey, would you help me with this? I'd really appreciate it. That gives him a chance to be your hero and go, yes, I'd be happy to do that. Not that I want to do it, but I'm happy to do it because you want me to do it. And you're more important than me at this moment. So this is where emotional intelligence 3.0 joins into understanding a lot of the misinterpretations between men and women.
Thank you, John. You were talking about your dog and I would like to mention what I observed about people who have either low emotional intelligence or, on the contrary, high emotional intelligence, and their pets, cats, dogs, or some other pets. I believe that cats and dogs and other pets, they do have high emotional intelligence. And when people have low emotional intelligence, they cannot connect on a deep level with people and their pets, and vice versa when people have high emotional intelligence. And what I noticed, that dogs or cats, they behave differently around owners who have low emotional intelligence or, on the contrary, high emotional intelligence. As an example, I had multiple clients who reported to me after working on unresolved traumas, genetic womb early childhood that created low emotional intelligence. Suddenly, these people noticed that they could connect on a much deeper level with people around and even strangers, and also their pets. And one woman, she said that her cat, that cat was her partner's cat, and that cat loved him but did not like her. And after working on the unconscious programs that created low emotional intelligence, suddenly their cat started to love her and be around her most of the time.
Amazing. Well, the answer to that is very clear. The higher your emotional intelligence, the more safe you are. See,
That's
everybody's drawn to what makes me feel safe. Maybe that's even one of the most important prerequisites to feel affection and warmth is to feel safe. And when you're at ease within yourself, pets are drawn to you. If you're not at ease within yourself, clearly there's going to be some pulling away. And of course, with my dog, she's not here right now, but you can see she'll walk up to some people and just be right there, and other people she runs away from. They can feel it. They're very much in touch with of the feeling level. Even when humans, we have those feelings as children, but when we don't have safety around us, they get repressed. And so many don't connect with their feelings. And what's interesting, again, when I look at the Mars Venus ideas of men and women being different, people assume that women are much more in touch with their feelings than men. Yet that doesn't mean women are good at processing their feelings inside. They can become very emotional, more so than most men, but some men are more on their female side, so they'll become emotional and reactive and so forth. That's could be man or woman. But women often think that they're more in touch with their feelings when actually many women are not in touch with feeling sad or acknowledging I'm feeling insecure, I'm afraid, or I'm feeling shame. Because what I have found is that anytime somebody has a stress reaction, a big trigger goes off inside of them, there's always some anger. There's always some sadness. There's always some fears and insecurities. And even at a deepest level, there's embarrassment or there's shame or there's guilt. And many women who come to my office cannot even look at those feelings. It's just, they just don't have the safety from their childhood to have experienced that. Some people are really good at one emotion. Like, for example, men tend to be very good at anger. It's sort of a manly thing to be angry. Now, ironically, if you look at the hormones of a man when he's angry, his female hormones, estrogen, are going really high, and his testosterone, the male hormone, is going low. If a man is actually in his grounded in his male hormones, and this is all simple biology, he'll be cool, calm, and collected. But when the cortisol hormone gets produced, that means he's facing danger, but he's lost confidence. And that's where men get angry. Now, when a man does get angry, what I teach men as far as emotional intelligence goes, don't talk. You see, when women are angry or sad or afraid or feeling shame or feeling embarrassed, talk. As long as you have a good listener, talk. Because when you talk, for a woman, your estrogen will go up. Because women only get upset when their estrogen levels are too low. This is all seen in the actual research. So if a woman can talk about her feelings, her stress levels will go down. So it's very important if she can experience her feelings and her emotions and talk about them, that will calm her if somebody's a good listener. Empathy. She needs empathy at that time. But for a man, if he's angry, he needs to settle down and cool down. And by talking, his estrogen will go even higher. So it's very important for women to understand this, is that when a man is angry, don't ask him questions. Don't try to get him to talk more. Because in her mind, if we can just talk about it, everything will be fine. But no, it's not always fine. Is that he needs to cool off for a while. We can talk about it again. And for a man with emotional intelligence, I will simply say, look, I need to think about this, and we'll talk again tomorrow at noon, or we'll talk in a few hours. I don't want to just say I'll never talk about this, but I need to calm down inside of me. Because if I keep talking, generally what happens for men, and you see this in couples where they argue, she's trying to ask, why would you do that? Or how could you do that? Or what were you thinking? And now he's trying to explain to her why he did something. And she says, but. Now they're in a big argument. You don't have to have that argument at all if you start to see that it's starting to get amplified. As soon as he's starting to get angry, she can be upset as long as he can keep cool. She will come back to a relaxed place. But men, when they start to get upset, they don't know, I need to stop talking. I need to listen more, or I need to take time away and then talk again. But women don't know this. They'll keep asking him questions, and they'll actually make him more angry. Whereas he needs to be asking her more questions, and then she'll get to talk about what's inside, and that helps balance her hormones. She starts to feel better. And this is all emotional intelligence 3.0. This is where you realize all the things about 1.0 and 2.0 are good, but now in relationship between a man and a woman, we have to take other considerations into it. For example, another example of this is really famous in Men Are From Mars, is men go to their caves. See, what happens when man has some stress, he needs to relax and forget his problems temporarily. So he has some sort of activity he does in the cave. It could be, a puzzle. It could be fixing his car. It could be doing a little research. It could be watching the news, anything that will distract him from the problems that he can't solve because it's the end of the day. And so what that does is helps him to rebuild his testosterone. Then he can come out of the cave and be more attentive, more emotionally connected to his partner, and so forth. If a woman doesn't understand that that's a healthy stress coping mechanism for her partner, then when he pulls away, she misinterprets the situation, thinking he must be mad at me. He must not love me. He must not care. And of course, that's going to hurt her feelings. And when she realizes he's just in his cave. Now, again, there's other relationship skills. Some men go to their cave and they never come out. And the reason for that sometimes is just simply he needs her to pull him into the cave, pull him out of the cave. And there's a way to do that by just saying, hey, when you have time, I need your help. Again, it's once again asking for help in a non-critical way. It's not like you're spending too much time, I feel lonely. It's, hey, honey, would you help me? And he says, well, what is it? Well, when you're ready, I'll just let you know. And he says, no, tell me now. And then you could actually just simply say, I just like to talk about my day for the next 10 minutes. And I prefer you say nothing. Just listen. I want to feel connected with you. Now, that won't make sense to him because he doesn't have this emotional intelligence, but he can learn very quickly. That's what I love about emotional intelligence. With the right guidance, we can pick it up. and we can learn it.
And I would like now to talk about the patterns, and also they can be benefits of high emotional intelligence. And I will start, and please continue, okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
And the patterns of people who have high emotional intelligence is they, as I mentioned before, can connect on a deeper level with themselves and other people, because relationship starts with yourself first. And also they have empathy. That is very important. They can actually feel themselves in other people's shoes when some people feel not comfortable. And also they can kind of predict and avoid conflicts because they are tuned in not only in their own emotions and feelings, they're observing other people's emotions and feelings. And I believe that people with high emotional intelligence, they're more likable. I read some research about that people have humor who have high IQ, high intellect, and high EQ, high emotional intelligence. And when people have humor, people, I believe, feel safe. What you mentioned before, being around these people. And also people with high emotional intelligence, they are very good communicators, and they're good collaborators in groups, and they're very good leaders. And do you have something to add to that? And also talk about how it's like how it improves relationships when people have high emotional intelligence.
Well, that would be my answer, which is definitely when you have high emotional intelligence in relationship, it's so, so important. Otherwise, you'll end up having arguments. You know, the whole point of communication is so I can understand where you're coming from. And often we don't understand where our partners are coming from. High emotional intelligence helps us have a sense of empathy and understanding of where somebody's coming from in a positive way. For example, one of the things you learn in emotional intelligence is to, when somebody's talking, assume that whatever they're saying is for the highest good. Why are they saying that? Because in some way they want the relationship to be, they love you and they want the relationship to be better. You know, just what's the positive intent behind that? So it could be a woman saying to her husband, you know, honey, you never do this okay. You're always leaving the light on, or you never bring in the new, or I always have to remind you to bring out the trash. Okay. So what's her highest intent? She wants him to remember so that she can be more at ease and she can feel more love for him, and she doesn't have to feel another burden because she has so many things to do. So that's her loving intent. But to a man, it can, without emotional intelligence, it can sound like she just wants to complain to make me feel wrong. Okay. She's criticizing me. She's pushing me down. She's pointing out what's wrong with me. That's not what she's doing at all. Is that you have to look at what is the positive intention behind it is let's create harmony together. I don't want to sit and be frustrated all the time that I have to tell you everything. So she's communicating, which is a good step. But then there's a way to communicate better, which is just to do it from the point of view of, you know, this is an advanced communication skill, but let's say your husband is constantly forgetting to empty the trash. And we already have to start with one aspect here. Why should the husband empty the trash anyway? The reason the husband should empty the trash anyway is because there's a hidden agreement between men and women. A man's job is to do dirty, dangerous, and difficult things. And when he does dirty, difficult, dangerous things, he becomes your hero because he's doing something that you don't like to do. And women sometimes don't realize we want to do dirty, dangerous, difficult things so you don't have to do it because you'll be happy. And if you're happy, it's like I went to China and got $100,000. See, we focus a lot on what's the outcome. And so that's an awareness of focusing in our relationships. What is the highest intent? And so you always sort of think, how can I communicate this in a way? So here's a technique that my wife figured out after many years of, say, for example, how she would do it with emptying the trash. Let's say I forget several times, which I told her, look, if I forget, just don't say anything about it. And next week I'll remember, because I had to bring out twice as much trash. so because that was my job, I'm happy to do that job. But what she said is, when I did empty the trash without her having to even ask, she made a point of saying, John, I've noticed you've been emptying the trash more often without my having to remind you. And I just want to remind you now how good it makes me feel. And it's not a big deal. I just wanted you to know how much I like it. And then she said the magic word, it's not a big deal. You see, when a woman is not getting what she needs, quite often she amplifies and pushes on him. You should do this. I've had to ask you several times. Why do I have to ask? Why didn't you do it? Don't you care about me? That's all just pushing at him. If you say, it's not a really big deal, but sometimes you forget, and I just want to remind you how much I love it, and then walk out of the room, then he'll think about what you just said. That took a lot of emotional intelligence on my wife's part in order to find that positive way to communicate with me in so many different ways. Instead of pointing out what I do wrong, point out what I do right, remind him how good it makes you feel when he does it, and he's already doing it somewhat. That's one skill. There's so many skills that, God, they're creative, but only if you have the place of, I know my partner's coming from the positive intent, that we can find them. Because a woman could easily go, he just doesn't love me. That's why he doesn't do it. He expects me to do everything. No, that's not the case. He loves you, whatever. And of course, in my books, I always explain things to help make things make sense. One of the things about men is that men have this efficiency gene, and women tend to not have that. Okay. They can develop it, but to men, it's a number one imperative. Never do anything you don't have to do. That's efficiency. That's why we have cars. You know, people, instead of walking, invented bicycles. Instead of bicycles, they invented cars. So you don't have to take as much time and so forth. So that's a practical side of it. But in a relationship, a man, because he doesn't understand women and their emotions and their feelings, they need to get messages again and again, like you did in the beginning, that she's number one, that she's important, that you care about her, that you're there for her. And it's the little things that make the big difference. Men don't know that. They do the little things in the beginning because they're not yet willing to do the big things. The big thing is, I'm going to get married. We're going to share our life together. We're going to have a family together. I'm going to work hard. So why do I have to do the little stuff? It's the little things, expressions of, you're beautiful today. You got your hair done. Let me give you a hug. You know, oh, I understand what you're going through. Let's talk about it. Not getting angry. These little things are what creates the romance that you felt in the beginning. And that takes a lot of emotional intelligence. And it's taught. You know, we have the potential for this if somebody just helps us discover it.
Thank you, John. And very briefly, I will mention the traits of people who have low emotional intelligence. It's pretty much opposite of the traits for people who have high emotional intelligence. People with low emotional intelligence cannot be empathetic. They often cannot connect on a deeper level, even with themselves, and also other people and pets. And also, they cannot predict often a conflict, observing other people, like what to say, what not to say, because they cannot understand other people's, what do they feel, the emotions, and what to do with that. And also, often they are not good team players.
Yes, right.
Yes, and not good leaders, not good managers.
It's the foundation of being a leader, is to be an example of how you want other people to be, which is cooperative, dedicated, heartfelt, integrity. You know, when you demonstrate that, that's inspiring to other people. I'll just give an example. Just the other day, somebody was asking for money for a charity, and one of my friends said, okay, I'm going to give this amount of money. And I was not going to give any money, but when my friend did it, I said, well, I'm going to do it too. You know, we are humans. We duplicate. That's how we learn as children, is by we trying to be like our parents. Even the process of crawling is your mind is trying to walk. I see my parents walk, but before I can walk, by crawling, I actually develop the muscles and the ability over time to stabilize going up. So it's that intention. And if we don't see it, it's hard for us to find it within us, the best intention within us. And again, that's one of the challenges of when children grow up in broken homes. If they don't have role models where they can see it, they don't know what they're missing and they don't know how to move in that direction. So that's a very key factor.
Thank you, John. And also, there are ways to improve emotional intelligence, different ways. And what I believe, one of the fastest way, and it's actually can be more efficient, more permanent, it's to identify unconscious programs that were formed as a result of trauma, genetic, womb, and early childhood, and to work on these unconscious programs. And when they're transformed, the results is what I observed among my clients will be permanent, and people can improve, even not working specifically on emotional intelligence, by even resolving these traumas can improve emotional intelligence automatically. Or some people prefer to work on improving emotional intelligence. And I would like to know, what about you? What are maybe one or two powerful techniques people can use to improve their emotional intelligence? And before you will answer, John, also I forgot to mention what I observed. If not to work on trauma, people improve their emotional intelligence over time by being around pets, owning pets, and also by being around people with high emotional intelligence. And please now let us know what maybe one thing or two things people can do to improve their emotional intelligence.
Well, first of all, I want to underline what you've just said, which is just to be around people who interact in a way with higher emotional intelligence. Before I married my wife, Bonnie, I was married before for 2 years. It was clearly not the right person for me. And we're good friends now still. But it was just the wrong pick. People might think, how did you know? Well, in that case, at that time, I didn't want children and she didn't want children. And then after 2 years and me having a job, I wanted to have children. So in a sense, I changed the rules and I was very happy to have children with Bonnie. So that worked out. But as far as tools that people can do, I remember in that first marriage, we were on an island somewhere and I watched a couple as they're getting onto the boat and the wife was nagging him. And it would upset me if somebody treated me that way. And he just heard her and said, I hear you. That's all he did. I hear you. I'll work on it. That was it. Just a little conversation. I went up to the guy. How did you have that reaction? I said, because all she needs is to be able to express herself and she'll be fine. She doesn't hold on to it because I don't hold on to it myself. I saw that and I mirrored that. Then I could do it myself, but I would have never known how to do that unless I heard it or saw it. And even you see in the interview today, I told a few little stories about how I react to something because of my high intelligence of emotional intelligence. Everything I do and dealing with problems in my life so much, it comes from that place. So part of my therapy with people and in my seminars, I always make a point about how I reacted in a situation, how I dealt with this situation. So that's the underlying what you just recommended is expose yourself to people with high emotional intelligence. So that's very important. One. Two, journaling. I think one of the most powerful ways to develop your emotional intelligence is to have a commitment. And comes from my Christian background. It can be other backgrounds as well. But in my Christian background, it's always the goal is to come back to love. Okay. Always to come back to love. Always come back to finding some way to find forgiveness. That's my goal. And I can't stupor in my anger or my frustration or my insecurities or whatever. I need to find a way out. There's lots of tools to do that. Journaling is one of the most powerful ways to do it. Only if your intention is to become aware of the negative emotions, to write them out as you're listening to yourself. How can you expect your partner to hear you if you can't even take the time to listen to what's going on in self? So that's self-discovery. So in that journaling process, I have an outline, which I think is very helpful, is when something's upsetting you, you look at, okay, what's upsetting me? What happened? What didn't happen? Start out with what happened, what didn't happen. And then let yourself look at what's my first emotion I feel. Maybe I feel hurt. Maybe I feel sad. Maybe I feel anger. Whatever it might be, start with whatever that emotion is that you're feeling and write out, again, I'm angry because of this. I'm angry because of this. I'm sad or I'm disappointed. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. And you just have to write out with every phrase, almost every phrase starts with an I feel or I am angry. I am sad. I am hurt. I feel afraid. And you write like 3 or 4 sentences, maybe sometimes 10 sentences on each emotion, but just to have you're on a hunt to look at behind every emotion is an unfulfilled desire. So what is that I want? So if I'm angry, you ignored me. What I want is for you to love me. Because a lot of times people, when they're angry, they're not in touch with what I want. They're just in touch with what I don't want. And when I was talking about men when they're angry, the reality is any man who's angry, he's also afraid. You see, this is part of emotional intelligence just for me to know. If I'm angry and somebody says, oh, you're just afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm tough. I'm strong, whatever. But you wouldn't be feeling angry if you weren't already feeling insecure. You have some fear. So part of emotional intelligence is to realize whatever you're feeling, the first thing you're feeling, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You have to go a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper, continuing to get in touch with what is it I want? What is it I want? And then you will have a wisdom which will come up, which will allow you to have more understanding. So I understand that. I'm grateful for this, and I forgive you for that. And what I want to do in the future is. So you have this, you come back to your positive self. And that's the discipline. That's my Christian background, which it doesn't have the technique, but it has the background, which says, I want to be able to come back and find love and forgiveness. And that happens through first understanding myself. Then I can be more understanding of others, and the wisdom to do that will come forth. So that's a real key factor, which is the ability to write out what you're feeling, always with the goal of coming back to love. So that's one technique. I'll just add the other, since you asked for 2, what you then do is the same technique, which is expressing what you feel, coming back to what I want, and then writing a letter to yourself as if the person you're upset with is hearing you. So it'd be like if I'm upset with my wife, I'd write out my feelings. And then what do I want her to say? I write out a letter. Dear John, I realize I upset you. I was critical of you. I was nagging. I was not there for you. And I was judging you. And that's wrong. I don't want to do that. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Because the truth is, you're wonderful. You're the one for me. And I always will be there for you. And I know you're always there for me. See, I will just write, what do I want to hear? And then you give it to yourself. Give it to yourself. And as you give it to yourself, then imagine. This is step 3 of that. Imagine how that would make me feel. And then I would feel, oh, well, you asked for apology. I forgive you. Anybody asks for apology, you immediately start to feel forgiveness. And you kind of go, but my partner's never going to say that. It doesn't matter. You imagine what you need to hear and then ask yourself, how would you feel? Because how you feel is who you truly are, which is, I feel safe. I feel good enough. I feel appreciative. I feel grateful. I feel love. I feel forgiveness. That's when we're our authentic self. That's who we are. And so that's a clever way to sort of come back to who we truly are.
Thank you so much, John. I truly enjoyed our conversation.
I so enjoyed it too. Always, I enjoy spending time with you, Dr. Olga.
Me too, John. Always, when we get together, we have such interesting conversations.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you.